coming up this week on the Markcast. Will you tell me, XFL fans, is it time to panic? I posted a poll on my Twitter this week. Is it time to panic, XFL fans? Got a lot of responses coming off of a couple weeks of silence now. No team names, no logos. Are we freaking out?
I'm freaking out, man. You are freaking out, man.
I bring the Professor Andrew Murray back onto the show. We have all the timelines, USFL 2022, XFL 2020, and now the XFL 2023, trying to figure out where we should be in the scheme of things. Are we running out of time? What is happening with the XFL in 2023?
For all the things we've talked about with the USFL and some of the faults of like how they maybe present the idea, they've played a season. They have a product. They have examples. They have evidence. We have like something to work with concretely. The XFL does not have that at this moment, at least this iteration of it. We have the iteration from 2 years ago, but again, that to me seems, as time goes on, just seems more and more distant and more different than what it was before. And I think, again, that's something that I think has not come to grips with a lot of people, is that I don't think this is going to be the same in a lot of ways. There are some similarities for sure, but I don't think it's going to be the same league.
Then lots of CFL content this week. CFL Hall of Famer, two-time Grey Cup champion, namesake of the Cornish Trophy, Jon Cornish, stops by the show to chat all things CFL Week 18.
But when we talk about the Canadian population, we talk about the CFL's demographics, the people in the seats at games. It's two different things. We need our demographics to reflect the Canadian demographic. We are the Canadian Football League. We can't survive if we cater to a diminishing 50% of the population.
And then longtime friend of the show, Tim Baines of the Ottawa Sun, stops by. Lots of chaos with the Red Blacks right now. We have new head coaches, everything else. What is happening there? We get all the insights from Tim. Don't forget, big time guest coming up next week on the show. Stay tuned. Hey guys, welcome to the Markcast. Reed here. Not always one for hyperbole. I don't always like to play the timeline card all the time at the panicking. How are we doing in terms of dates being aligned? But I did think it was worthwhile to have a conversation this week on the podcast. Thank you guys all so much for stopping by. Going to have team names, and then Hurricane Ian, and then a lot of people thought it was going to be this week, and now, still no teases, anything from the XFL. So I thought it was good to have the conversation. I posted on Twitter, is it time to panic? We're getting ready here. We still need team names and logos and the draft and uniforms, local events, kind of all that stuff. And so I thought Andy Murray, the professor, as I call him, really good spot for him to come back on. Andy was on a couple of weeks ago when we thought we were going to get the team names and logos. I thought it was good, really good, long, in-depth conversation. Like I said, just kind of setting our expectations. Where were we kind of now in XFL 2020? Where were we with the USFL? I don't always like to play that game like, the XFL had their draft on this date in October, but I do think it's helpful just to know, like, in the scheme of the world, like X number of dates out from kickoff, like what were we doing before? Like what information did we publicly know? I just always think that's good. Really appreciate Andrew coming on. Also, we break down the IFL team owner of the Green Bay Blizzard coming on her podcast, the team's podcast, Strictly Blizness, talking about how the IFL is presumably going to announce a working relationship, that's the Indoor Football League, a working relationship with the XFL in terms of allowing its players to potentially jump to the XFL, running some combines and stuff together. So that is a little bit of XFL news this week, and kind of a really bizarre, we're just in like holding pattern here. Andy, on his interview, kind of called it a paralysis right now that we kind of have with the XFL, where just don't have a lot of information coming out, and no real intention of, yes, it's coming soon, it's not coming soon, what's going on. So I really thought that was good. So Andy's coming on. We're doing XFL. Are we panicking? We're talking the IFL, presumably to come announcement of their working relationship with the XFL. Then lots of CFL stuff this week. Really appreciate Jim Mullen, longtime friend of the show, helping me set up Jon Cornish coming on. Jon, multi-time, most outstanding Canadian, two-time Grey Cup champion, CFL Hall of Famer with the Calgary Stampeders coming on, running down all sorts of CFL stuff. We get into like the Bo Levi Mitchells of it, kind of all the struggles and successes of a lot of the CFL teams this year. Plus, get Jon's thoughts on kind of CFL expansion and how do we feel about the health of the league and all that stuff. Really thought that was good because I think from a former player, I like to get kind of nuts and bolts, like what is happening right now in the CFL. And then also like, what do you think about like the state of the CFL? So I thought Jon was great. Really appreciate him recording that over the weekend, taking time out of his busy schedule now, his post football playing career. So really appreciate Jon Cornish coming on. And then Tim Baines, I just scheduled in with him. I had the date wrong or the time wrong on our Zoom, but Tim with the Ottawa Sun coming on. Lots of chaos in Ottawa. Paul LaPolice, their head coach there, being let go mid-season following a really disastrous season. I don't think that's all on Coach LaPolice's fault. Jeremiah Mazzoli got hurt and all of that stuff. But Tim coming on to talk through that and then kind of everything else, CFL as well. I wanted to get enough CFL chatter this week between Jon and Tim. I think that's it for me. Like and subscribe. I think Brian Scott is going to be sending the football back that he signed for the 2,500 subscriber giveaway. So if you want to be a part of that, make sure you are subscribed to the show. I applied for our CFL media credentials this week for the Grey Cup and the Grey Cup Festival games, kind of all that stuff. That doesn't close the portal to the end of October, so it'll probably be a little while till we hear back from that, but really appreciate that. And then shout out to longtime friend of the show, Matt Mangle, just announced this week via the USFL. I think the Maulers page actually tweeted it out, but Matt will be back in the USFL for season 2 with Kirby Wilson. Mixed thoughts on that, but really happy that Matt gets his spot back in the USFL. There was kind of all the stuff last year with Matt doing dual positions and Andrus and them trying to kind of save roster spots. And so I'm really glad. One thing with the USFL expanding their rosters headed into season 2 is going to be like actual special teams, positions and players and kind of stuff like that. So I think Matt will be in a really good spot there. Remember, should have a really good show next week, and then we could potentially have an extraordinary show next week. I'm waiting to hear back on an additional interview request, but at least we will have a good XFL fans. You'll be really excited to hear this interview next week. I'm thrilled to share that with you. We will be recording that. I'll post Monday probably, and then call for voicemails if anyone wants to send that in. So leave your suggestions, in the comments. What do you think? Who do you think the big guest is going to be? Also, are you panicking? Am I alone here? I just thought it was a good kind of time to take a temperature check of the XFL community right now as we are now in October before the November draft and then the February kickoff for the XFL. Thank you guys all so much for your support. Please like and subscribe, and I'll check back in at the end of the show. Thanks. Well, I'm joined today again by the Professor Andrew Murray. Back again, guest scheduling issues a little bit. I appreciate Andy coming on, but I think we've workshopped something good to talk about today. Remember, big time guest next week, XFL excited. Andrew Murray, how are you doing?
I'm good. 2 things. 1, I'm getting used to the professor title. And 2, I liken myself to be someone in the bullpen. If you need like a relief pitcher and you need me to come out and like throw, I don't know, junk ball pitches, I'm totally ready for it. So...
Well, and both your Padres and my Mariners have both, made it to the postseason. That's exciting.
First time ever.
So this is exciting. So we're talking my working theory today, and we're going to go through all this. And then Andy also has his article talking about the IFL team owners, XFL pipeline, that whole thing. My working theory is that the XFL is going to be the best played football league of all time. Best scouted, best coached. We have all the DPPs. We have everything in the world. Attendance, I'm worried about. I'm worried about local fan interest. I think we're halfway there where the USFL maybe had a little bit, rush training camps. We kind of got some players together. And then we also maybe bundled some of the, local stuff. I think the XFL, we will be well played. I just don't know if we will be well observed. Are you going to go down this journey with me, Andy?
I'll try my best. I'll hold your hand along the way too if you need to.
That's good. So I have the timelines here. We're going to go together. USFL 2020 timeline, XFL, and all that. I don't like being a timeline guy, but I do think it's good to at least where are we in the time frame of the world here? X many days out from, kickoff back in 2020. Kind of what were we doing? I don't like well, they did the draft in February, so that means they have to do the draft. I just like knowing where are we relative for that. But to start this whole conversation, I tweeted last night at 5:30 p.m. I said, is it time to panic, XFL fans? And that's all I said. Yes or no. Almost 400 votes in as we record. 50.7% saying yes, 49.3% saying no. What do you make of that nearly 50% of the XFL diehards that follow me on Twitter are panicking right now?
I think people are information hungry, and when you don't get information to people in a certain time frame, then the initial response is to say, what the hell is going on? And I think that might be some of the reaction from a number of people. Now, I know that we've been going on and banging on about teams and logos for, I don't know, it feels like an eternity now, because it's been such a long roadmap back to this. I mean, gosh, what did Dwayne mention this? Dwayne Johnson mentioned this in December of last year on that NBC program. So that's 10 months ago. So, and he said it was going to come out in January, February earlier this year. So yeah, it's been a moment. I think the thing that adds to it is the fact that we think we know, or at least have enough information or intel to think that we know the names and the logos, and we've had information beforehand. Again, I think it's the whole thing about this not being completely a clean slate. So it's kind of this idea of, well, we think we have enough information. Why does it seem like they don't seem like they have enough information? Or it kind of almost like that the general public is more on it than the actual people who are in charge of it. But again, that's just speculation. It's a weird situation, because it's not like before where it was just nothing and we didn't know anything, and then they were released afterwards. So I don't know. I mean, this is uncharted waters, in my opinion.
And, and when I tweeted this, and obviously, and Max and others, Max helped me come up with the timeline, kind of checking all the dates. He said, people just worrying about the logos, that is not my concern. My concern is not that we don't know the logo, the team names. Remember, we thought we were going to know 2 weeks ago. You were on. We did the whole, how are they going to announce everything next week? I understand Hurricane Ian and all that. My concern is this is checkpoint 1 of 87 on the checklist. So we still haven't even we're not even on the list right now. We got to do the names. We got to do some sort of event. I mean, do we have to do the meet and greets again? Do we have to do that? Are we doing the December kind of training camp showcase on the local? Whatever you're going to do, this is step 1 of whatever, in the uniforms and the draft. We don't have the social media. We're still hiring, setting up all of that stuff. That's where I get concerned. It's not, okay, we don't know our team names October. That's fine. There's still many things to go. I wore my Dragons jersey to the Mariner clinching game last Friday. Cal Raleigh walk-off home run there. That was crazy. I got a lot of people. Hey, cool Dragons jersey. What's going on with that? I'm like, oh, it's coming back February 18th. Really? I didn't. And so there's still it exists, right? This mindset, people understand, but I don't know. I don't know if the tweet from The Rock is going to turn this on the same way.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I guess it's where's the information coming from? And it seems like the continuous theme, and we'll get into this later on too with the IFL stuff. It's where we learn this stuff is never from the league directly itself first. It always seems to be amongst other people. Now, it's obviously we're in a media group, so of course we talk to each other about this stuff all the time. But even, I mean, there's just some random sources or random things that I find out about stuff where I'm I'm not sure if I should know about this or if they should have told me about this first directly. This is odd that I found about it in this certain way. Look, I know not every league is the same as far as every PR person's going to be the first to tell you something, or every direct message from a team is going to be able to disclose information. There's reporters, we have reporters for a reason. They're going to be able to get the scoop on something before it becomes public knowledge. But it just seems odd with some of the things that we've learned about, or how people have gone about getting that information, or how that information has come from secondary sources and not from directly from the XFL. It's just, it's like crickets, but we're almost how do I put it? It's you talking to those people at the game is you trying to be the cricket whisperer. You're being hey, this is what's going on. I think this is what they're saying, but I'm not sure. It's kind of you're translating for them. So that maybe is also part of the kind of confusion right now as to why there hasn't been much information from the league.
Well, and I understand it, the controlling the flow of information. It's the same. I was hoping this would feel better after they had the Arlington announcement. We've talked about all that in the showcases and all that. Okay, they're going to open up all this stuff. I get the same vibes now, USFL and XFL, in terms of like league negotiations. I understand that it's a mindset, but even when we were doing like the team, the whatever it was going to be that was canceled because of Ian and the team names and the Rod Woodson, and I'm corresponding. I'm like, okay, I'm trying to, like, I know things here, and I'm trying to figure out like how you guys would best like, and then the response is always like, well, then they just don't respond, and you're like, okay, well, we've just had kind of a crackdown on like, this is how we would like everybody to act. I understand that. But then now also it's like, well, we're not going to respond sometimes if we don't want. And I get that. I mean, I get that you're trying to control, but that to me is the overwhelming right now feeling. And it's hard when, like you said, I feel like we know more than a lot of the people in league, in certain levels of league management. Sometimes I think that you and I probably know as much or more, depending on who you're talking to, of what timelines are. And it gets frustrating when you're just trying to get like a simple answer out about like, what would you like me to say about this?
Yeah, and I think that whole brand control thing is what makes it so at times maybe a little bit frustrating in terms of just trying to get our end of the message out, or trying to pass information along, because there's so much like awareness and so much focus on trying to keep everything tight knit and trying to not let anything get out whatsoever, because we know people who are vultures for information, people who've like gone out and done things like break through the passwords of the XFL shop and be able to get like team names or team city names or colors or whatever, be able to find out something that way, or someone finding some random clip of some person talking somewhere and saying, hey, what's this about? And I mean, that happens all the time because there are people who are information hungry. But look, there's always going to be people like that. I mean, there's always people who are going to want more, even though you've given them something, and people are going to speculate and people are going to search. Some people are going to maybe go through maybe not ethical ways of getting information, but that's what's going to happen. Like, there's going to be people who are going to want to know more. And so I think as a league and as a representative of your league, all you can do is really say, hey, this is what we believe in. This is what we're going for. And you can't really spend too much time being concerned on how people are going to take that information, every single word that you say. You just, at some point, it almost creates paralysis, right? Like, you just want to believe like, oh my God, what happens if I say that this way? And it's like, then do it better next time, or like just work on it the next time. The NFL makes so many mistakes as far as handling their players, their information. I see them get criticized all the time about stuff. And at some point, they just have an agenda that they just sort of motor past. If they get enough feedback or criticism, sure, they might tweak it in the future. But I don't think they spend too much time, any sleepless nights, thinking, oh my God, I said this one word this way in this one tweet.
I like the paralysis. What did Apple's was it Phil Schiller said when they got rid of the headphone jack on the iPhone? Courage. Got to have courage. We got to move forward there. It is hard, and I had something else I was going to say, and then I got caught on my joke there. But I just that's what I was going to say. So to me, and I understand that Danny, The Rock, Redbird, everybody, tremendous success, track record. Conversations now that I had a year and a half ago with people talking about like Danny The Rock actually owning the league, running the league, Redbird, all these things, like, it's so different than we have a new flavor of Zoa. Here's the tweet. Go buy it. Like, we have a new Terramana's out. Like, go tweet it. The Rock will like, Troy Aikman's got a new beer. I'm drinking the warm beer, and like, okay, go buy that. The XFL, it is more like the DC thing. It's such like, and even DC is way more mainstream when we have like Black Adam and Wonder Woman. Like, this is the niche of the niche and league building and getting people to invest in that. Like, I think this is so different than anything they've worked on before in terms of like the cost. Like the investment of the consumer is so much higher in the XFL. Like, okay, we're going to go watch the thing and invest and like learn about these players, like what's going on. Same with the USFL, right? We're getting people in versus just, I got to go to 7-Eleven. I'm going to go buy a Terramana flavor. And that is my level of commitment in this brand.
Yeah, people are deep in the reads when it comes to like what information they want, what research they're doing. Yeah, not those reads, the other reads, REED. But you are literally a read deep in the reads too. Like, I mean, you talk about all kinds of different things. People message me all the time information about like this person is talking about this, or hey, look out for this. Like people are on it, and I think that's the thing that. Maybe I'm not sure if it hasn't connected or if it's not something that I think is in the same spectrum that Danny Garcia and Dwayne Johnson deal with most of the time. Like these are not, I don't think these are the same kinds of people in the DC universe, the Zoa universe or whatever, or like clothing lines or all that stuff. These people want information. They want to be connected and they want to be integrated into it, especially when it comes to their community. This is something that I think the obsession factor of it is something that I'm not sure that they're used to. And I'm not saying they can't deal with it. I'm just saying like they can't, I think it's just something that they don't think about so heavily because they have all these other projects that I think of on a baseline level of operating. But, you know, but someone like say, for example, Oliver Luck last time, I mean, he understood how passionate people were, how integrated people were, how much people wanted it. And I think sometimes, unless you're there, unless you're on the ground level and you're interacting with those people consistently, I don't know if you can see that for yourself. So I don't know. I'm not sure if that's exactly what they got when, for example, when you went down to Texas to Dallas. I'm not sure if that was enough for them to understand that or see that at that time. That is Danny and Dwayne. But I just wonder if, like, eventually they're going to have to see, like, there needs to be more, like people are just going to want more attention or want more, just more like investment, or at least seemingly more investment in what's going on, or at least somebody has to, because this is just how it is. Like people are obsessed and they're always going to be obsessed.
It is funny. Just speaking of people looking for information and all that stuff, I was going to talk before. I had posted, you know, we had the quarterbacks allocated and all that stuff. And, you know, I had the list and then Mike came out with the article that was about like, you know, Ryan Willis is, you know, allocated to like St. Louis, or I can't even remember what all the ones are at this point we talked about last week. But I was in the Facebook group yesterday and someone was commenting on just the post that just had the list and not the teams. And they're like, Reed, like, what can you tell us about that? You know, we want information. I'm like, Mike wrote like a 100 word article. Like, go read that. Like I will say like people that are information hungry, you know, you have your article today out there. Mike's got his. I know Anthony just had one come out. Greg Parks over at Board did the whole rundown earlier this week, I believe, of like, you know, what you should know about all these quarterbacks. Like there is information out there. It is funny to me sometimes. Like Mike will say, "Oh yeah, Reed, I've had it that it was going to be the Orlando Guardians for like 3 months, and no one even read it in my article." And I'm like, it is. So just there is information out there if you go to seek it. And I don't want to feel like. Oh, and that was the other thing. I don't want to feel like this is just like a cry session today, but I do feel like, you know, after the delay and all that, now the Rock's on like the big Black Adam tour, it's like, okay, XFL takes the back seat again. It is kind of what it feels like a little bit. Like as long as we don't have like a Terramana to release or a Zoa to promote or Black Adam or Project Rock or what, you know, Under Armour, like, okay, so, okay, this is number 7 now. Like, okay, we're clear again. And it does feel like, they had this planned, Ian and all that happened, and now like we've missed the window, and it does feel like they're it's like just put a video out and like let's move on. Like you need, not everything can be. We just got to go. We got to go. It's October here.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. It can't be seventh fiddle in the minds of the people who follow the league. It can't. Like it has to be something that is seen as a priority, and I think that's what people are waiting for. You know, we talked about the turning on of the car, right? The Ferrari, starting the Ferrari. Mike Mitchell's made that allegory before. We've talked about that allegory. Well, I'm starting to think now it's like they have 10 different cars in the garage, and occasionally they bring out the red Ferrari that is the XFL, but it's like they almost do it as if like out of, I don't know, obligation, or they just want to do donuts in the driveway, and then they're like, all right, we can put it back in now. That's enough for today. Like you can't like that's not exactly going to appease the fans of that model. It's going to be like you have to do a little bit more. So my question is, I'm wondering going forward, do they get someone who is going to be able to do that role and be more pronounced? Like that was the thing that I took from the XFL last time, is that Vince McMahon wasn't really the cheerleader. I mean, he popped in once in a while and say, hey, good to see this thing going well, and then popped back out. I can remember like one tweet from him during the season. I think it was week 1. And then I didn't really hear from him the rest of the way. It was all overlooked. Like he was the guy that was forward face. He was the guy saying, I am representing this league. This is what I believe in, and this is what we should invest in. I wonder if they're going to tag somebody to do that for them moving forward, because again, they're busy people. They have a lot of things to do, but someone has to be the showcase maestro. Someone has to be able to showcase all this stuff. And if they don't consistently, as much as the fans want, then I don't know if they're going to be able to be satisfied. So I wonder if they maybe give that role to somebody down the road. I'm not sure.
Yeah, like, I thought that was going to be Russ Brandon, and I don't know if he's got a lot of other obligations going on. I think he is a good focal point for that, but I agree. I just, it's like, I wear many different hats, like, and I might have 15 different, you don't want to know how many Washington Commanders hats I have, but like today I'm like, well, I'm going to wear this one because I haven't worn this one in a while, right? But, it could be another 3 months before I decide to wear this one. So timeline here, a long promise, and then we'll do the IFL stuff. So as we record, we are 135 days away from kickoff, which is either daunting or not, depending on how you look at that. I remember when Paul and I was like, we will record 47 more episodes of this show before whatever happens. So we are 135 days away. So for the USFL, and the draft is 41 days away, presumably on November 16th. USFL back in 2022, they first unveiled their names. They did the Colin Cowherd segment November 22nd, 2021, 145 days away from kickoff. So we're freaking out, like, blood is in the water here. So and I mean, you take this for what you want. You know how I feel, but like maybe you say, well, Reed, this is not a big deal. So the names, 145 days away from kickoff. And then we had the uniforms, where everyone's talking about the uniforms. That was 58 days away from kickoff. And then we had the draft 53 days away. So we got names, then uniforms, then draft, 53 days away from kickoff, April 16th. And then we'll do the XFL. But knowing that, so we sit 135 as we record. We didn't even get USFL names till 145 days out.
True. And we didn't get scheduled until like the last moment. In fact, I remember one of the things I was waiting on so vigorously was the tickets to go to the games, because I was waiting for the actual schedule, which was like less than 2 months before the games actually kicked off. And I think, we didn't have the draft until, what was that? February, was it? It was February of 20.
The USFL draft was February 22nd, and then they had the supplemental the next day, the 23rd.
Yeah, as I remember doing the supplemental draft stream with you, and I think that so that was sometime before. It wasn't that much, like it wasn't way in the future, for example. So the USFL kind of rolled it out the same way, and I think maybe that's also part of it too, is that maybe we were talking it up to the point where we said, well, the XFL has a different vision. They're going to be more on it. They're not going to just say it all at last minute or just release it on Twitter, and they're going to be more proactive. And then here we are with the timeline getting closer and closer. We're thinking and seeing, well, okay, maybe not. Maybe it's actually going to be closer to the season after all. So I think that's also maybe trying to like readjust our expectations as well. So that might be part of it. My whole thing in this, I know you asked your Twitter followers if they were panicking. My feeling over this is not panic. It's mild confusion. Like that would be my feeling at the moment. But again, like if this is what they think is the best way, I suppose it's just odd that there's all this information that's supposedly out there and then it's not being disclosed formally. So, but that timeline is interesting in that it's a lot closer than people realized from before. Like the original XFL timeline was actually pretty close, and this one we're still, I mean, I guess by comparison, I guess we're still far out from it.
Yeah, I have. So March 7th, I have from Fox, March 7th, Daniel Miller over at Fox 29 here. I have that was when the full schedule was released. So that was 5 weeks before kickoff, right? Because the kickoff for USFL was April 16th, so March 7th. So anyway, to put it in perspective that way. So we go to the XFL here, XFL member, February 8th, 2020 kickoff. So we first had the names unveiled, and I will always remember watching this day because I watched this live stream, and then I went and filmed one of the best. It was like on a Tuesday, one of the best weddings I've ever filmed. August 21st, 2019. That was when we saw all the the dragons coming from the sea and all that stuff. 171 days from kickoff. So that was August. Then for the different for the XFL, and I forgot this because remember I wasn't in the media back then. We had the draft before the uniforms because everyone's talking here like, well, we gotta get the team names, and then we have to have the uniforms because like, what are they gonna do? They're gonna go up on stage and they're gonna be wearing like the XFL Seattle shirt. Well, the XFL draft was October 15th and 16th. That was 116 days from kickoff. They announced that a week before they did the draft. They said next week we're bringing the draft. And then they had the uniforms on December 3rd, 2019, which was 67 days from kickoff, and then obviously the kickoff in February. So knowing that 171 days for names, draft 116 out, and then the uniforms, I just totally forgot that. Did you forget that we got the uniform second?
I did, honestly. I was not completely remembering when those came out. So, and that's also, again, that's a big thing. The uniforms are, I think, one of the biggest things for us right now because there's some of the colors are changing, some of the logos are changing, and some of the team names are changing. So, which means that the uniforms are changing. And so, I think the fact that that information hasn't been disclosed yet, again, is why we're in such a tizzy right now. At least a lot of people are. I'm not personally, but I think the idea of when they're supposed to come out, again, it's like the announcement time. You said that the draft last time was announced a week ahead of time, but we've already known this November 16th date for at least a month or two, like for supposedly, right? But it seems like it's out there. Again, this is the whole thing, right? It's information that is supposedly out there already that's not being discussed formally by the league. I would have to go more back and see like, okay, when did people supposedly know about this? Or when was this like kind of semi-public knowledge, but not really, like I also want to know, like, how was the league is being covered, I think differently than it was last time. I think that's also a big part of it as well. Like what ways what did people know about last time that they knew about then and knew about now? Again, it's all about context, right? I mean, we've gone while this is like, again, it's a ramp up to it. It's a different ramp than last time, and it's a very different ramp for a lot of different reasons.
Well, we have evolved as a species here in alt football in the last. I mean, that's what and I understand and I get that the XFL, we don't want to be compared to 2020. We don't want all that stuff. Like, alt football fans have lived through so much now, and that was even in USFL terms when they were like, "We're going to Birmingham," and you're like, got to keep in mind, people in Birmingham been through this before, might be a little hesitant to buy in year one, right? I mean, I think USFL in Birmingham season 2 could only be better, right? In terms of like, hey, this is coming back now. Like, we know this was a thing, but it's like they do not exist in the bubble. And it was weird. Like, even if you go back to that Arlington, the interviews where it was Danny and the Rock, and then Russ Brandon at the Arlington press conference, and everyone's asking like, so like, why now? Like, why? And they're like, well, like, we feel like this is the right time, and we just feel like there's it's the same. I mean, it felt like the same verbiage that's been used, for the last 20 years with this kind of thing. And like, I don't know if any of this, like all the knowledge that we have accumulated in the alt football world over the last, even just 3 years with Spring League and Fan Control Football and the Arena and CFL and all that stuff and XFL and USFL, like, I wonder how much of that did they pick up in terms of like, what are we learning from? Because it does feel like it's a lot of the same mistakes, at least that I'm seeing right now.
I think they're talking to the right people as far as business relations go. Like they're not leaving any stones unturned. Again, I talked a little bit with Mike Mitchell yesterday about this, and it's kind of like, I mean, they talked to the CFL people. They've talked to IFL people. I'm not sure how much they've talked to USFL people. I'm not sure about that. I'm sure they've had some discussions, but I know it's dirty. It's a dirty word. It's a dirty phrase, but like, I think they have at least tried to check and see in different areas and explore different options. And from that point of view, that's great. If logistically you're talking all these different leagues, that's great. I think that can only help you. Obviously, they have their partnership with the NFL Alumni Academy. You know, that's important too. But as far as like, again, knowing the pulse of the people who follow it, it's very different, right? And I think, again, it's the idea of just getting information out there. And I think you alluded to this before, the allegory of you saying like USFL is like caveman with football, like let's play football. This is all it needs to happen. Like at some point, maybe as a league, you kind of have to ask yourself like, okay, what is the right time? Like, what is the right time for everyone? Like, is the right time for us, or is this the right time for everyone else? What is the right time to get all this information out? And at some point, I think people just want football. Like some people, at some point, it's just a primordial thing that people just want to have in front of them. It's not all about speculation. I mean, speculation is a big part of it, obviously. Like speculation is what drives the NFL media every single year in the offseason. But at some point too, you have to just have the product out there and just say, okay, this is what's going to happen. For all the, like things we've talked about with the USFL and some of the faults of like how they maybe present the idea, they've played a season. They have a product. They have examples. They have evidence. We have like something to work with concretely. The XFL does not have that at this moment, at least this iteration of it. We have the iteration from 2 years ago, but again, that to me seems, as time goes on, just seems more and more distant and more different than what it was before. And I think, again, that's something that I think has not come to grips with a lot of people, is that I don't think this is going to be the same in a lot of ways. There are some similarities for sure, but I don't think it's going to be the same league.
It just, we've lived through all this, and I understand, and XFL, like, this is week to week. I got to show every week. Like we're doing. I understand this is the I'm Atlas pushing the globe up the hill or whatever that is, but like. Remember when they were like, okay, we're going to push back a year, and like Mike's talking, like, and I don't blame Mike for this, but like, and Mike's like, yeah, like we're like a year of build up and like behind the scenes shows, and we're filming all this stuff, and they're going to have all this. And I'm like, I don't even know if we need all that, but like, that's cool. Like, okay, I guess we'll build this up and we'll have profiles and we'll talk about like, I mean, we're 135 days out. Like, I mean, it's fine that we didn't get any of that. I don't feel like we are getting that now. And I feel like whatever plan was, or maybe we don't want to do as much right now. Like I said, I think the football side of this, top notch. We have the best, like, God knows we have the best scouts, and we're running the showcase, and we're having the specialist showcase, and we're having the supplemental showcase, and we're doing, we're going to have 3 drafts, and we're going to have in the training. Like, I think football is going to be outstanding. I just worry about this feeling like USFL in cities, but still not having the same, like, it's never going to be 2020, and that's fine. And I didn't want to be the homer for a long time, but now I do understand kind of where people are feeling that frustration.
Well, it's like perfectionism, it's like wanting to be absolutely fantastically 100% perfect, no blemishes, all that brand control. And I think that's the kind of thing that stops you from doing things like that, stops you from actually just getting your product out there. Right. I mean, that's the reason why, for example, someone like me hasn't really gotten like YouTube videos out. I've always wanted to do more YouTube videos, but I'm like so like worried about like, okay, how would I present it? What's the idea? What's going on behind it? Some people just do it and then they figure it out as they go along. And I think that's, some leagues are like that. Some alt football leagues are more like, well, you know what? We have a general idea and we have a like general mission statement. We'll continue to expand as we go along. We'll figure it out. I mean, look, again, we'll get into this a little bit later, but like the IFL, for example, they keep expanding. Like they're going to have a 16th team next year. They're adding another team. They keep adding more teams. They keep bringing teams back into the fold. They brought the team back into San Diego this year who had taken 3 years off, and they just keep continuing to expand, and that's for them. It's like they're just trying to build their brand. I think for the XFL, it's the same way in that they want to build their brand, but they're so concerned about it being absolutely perfect, like before anyone can say anything about it. And if it's not, then it's not worth releasing. And I think, again, the word I used earlier, paralysis, it just feels like absolute paralysis if it's not exactly the way they want it to be. And again, at some point, you just have to get something out there to be able to generate some sort of content or interest, or just be able to tell people what you're about, because otherwise you're going to have people like at the Mariners game asking you with your Dragons jersey on, like, hey, what's going on here exactly? I thought they were coming back, because then there's just sort of, again, general confusion as to what's happening.
I was really surprised how many comments I had on that. Like, you never know, like, because I wear a lot of dumb stuff. You never know what. I have a couple more comments on this, and then we can, if you have anything else, or we can do the IFL stuff. Seeing the uniforms came out after the draft, I do think we need to set our expectations correctly. I do think this time, like, I think whether it's the end of October, whatever, we get, team logos, names. Maybe then maybe we don't get the uniforms again until December. I don't think that the uniforms and that's all one thing. I think that can come later. I don't think we necessarily need to get logos, then uniforms, then draft in that order. The other thing here, and I had the dates of just some of these local events, because that's where my thing is, because the XFL's business model is so predicated right now. Butts and seats. Danny, we're playing the games in the cities. We're not going to have the same issue that the USFL had. Kind of activating those fans. So remember, we had the summer showcases. So, we had the one in Seattle that was June 22nd, 2019. I wasn't able to go to that one. I had a wedding, but that was kind of the first little activation of that. And then we had a local event August 28th in Seattle. So that was a week after the Dragons was announced. We did that at in the Legions Field bar down by the stadium, like right across the street. That's where we had Jim Zorn was there. We had the media people were there. I can't remember. I think Ryan Gustafson was there, the team president at the time. So that was kind of the first, segment of that. So, we're pushing this now. So that's where my concern is, like, how quick do these events roll out? Because then you also had events September 16th in St. Louis, 10/10 in New York, 10/17 in DC and Dallas. And then Dallas even had another one in November 7th. And those were like 145 days out in St. Louis, 121 days out in New York, and then we're getting 93 days out in Dallas for that second one. But you kind of see the range there. But a lot of these events, St. Louis did like a whole series of them, kind of like a high school, I think Max was telling me. But you see a little bit more of the rollout there. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, again, it depends on like the pacing of the rollout, or how gradual it's going to be. I think, like you said, going back to the uniform and the logos and the colors, I get the feeling it's just going to be all one thing now. It's not going to be this like, well, here's 4 logos of this team, of these teams. Let's do 4 logos next week. I don't think that's going to happen. I think not like, for example, how the USFL did it on Colin Cowherd's show. It's going to be like, I think it's just going to be bang, but it's going to be a presentation, right? It's going to be like a whole formal announcement. And again, it's all the scheduling things. Again, it's almost like it's based around the schedules of Danny and Dwayne, where it's like, okay, when they're both available at the same time and they can do this thing at the same time in this place, then everything can come out. And it's almost like waiting for constellations to align at some point. It just feels like it's aligning the stars. And, I am wondering what would have been announced if Hurricane Ian did not come through, because Danny was in Florida. She was going to go to that Orlando event. It seemed like something was going to be announced in some way, shape, or form. So I am wondering what it was exactly. I don't know if we'll ever find out. I am curious, though, what exactly was supposed to come through that way, because, again, it's almost like that kind of was a stopgap for what was going to happen, because it did at least timeline-wise line up with what Rod Woodson was talking about on Pat McAfee's show, of those logos and those team names coming out a week after that. That was literally going to be a week after that. So I don't know how that affected it. But again, it almost feels like once the comment passes, it's like we have to wait for the next one to show up. Yep. And I guess that's going to be maybe this New York event that's going to be at the end of the month, but who knows? Yeah,
and just so, and we had tweeted that out. Let me pull that up too, just because that is kind of what I'm basing this on. Max had sent it over to me. Oh, that was where I applied for the CFL stuff. Where is... This is wonderful podcasting. I'll look it up here. It feels to me like there's a finite number of things that anyone could do. Oh, here we go. So we have from Dan Primick, Axios, our inaugural deal marketing event will take place at the Altman Building in New York City on October 26th. Guests include Mark Cuban, Danny, and Jerry will be there. Also, the chairman of ESPN Sports and Content, James Pitaro, will be there. So this is our, it's like invite only, but it's a the BFD is an axiom we use to describe things we are big. Dan Patrick's BFD section of Axios Pro Raw Data newsletter has always used to spotlight the biggest deal of the day. So it seems like it's kind of a sports marketing. Jerry Cardinell is one of the guest speakers, along with Mark Cuban. Like I said, Danny Garcia. The presumption with Max and I was this is happening October 26th, so I would place whatever is going to come before that because they're not going to show up at the end of October, still not having anything announced for the XFL.
Is that a bet or a wager? Because it sure sounds like it.
Well, yeah. But anyway, but back to my original talk. Like when I do my business, I run a wedding business, right? And I do blogs and I post videos and I go film and then I do a wedding vendor podcast and I used to do like a wedding planning podcast. And then, you're always trying to figure out like, what is the limit of like things I can do? And then I had a newsletter for a long time and I finally decided like that was the step too far. Like I just didn't have, like I had 5 days a week and I could do Monday, I could do blog and then Tuesday I could edit, like Wednesday. And you kind of get to a point, and I'm not saying like Danny and The Rock, like they're going to jump ship on the XFL. Like I'm not saying anything crazy like that, but there's just a finite of like scheduling opportunities, like you said, of like when these constellations arrive. And it does feel like the XFL is like the 8th thing on a 7-day week. And like, we really wanted to get in this week, like maybe in February when we have that extra day of the month, like maybe we can do it then. You know what I mean?
Well, it's almost like convention planning. Like they're going to be at like some convention for some specific date at some point during the year that you can go and then ask about their projects, where you can be like, so what is going on here? And then Danny can be like, oh, I'm glad you asked. And it's like, well, I really wanted to ask like 3 months ago, but thanks. It does just feels like so calculated in how that information comes out and when it's supposed to be disclosed. But again, like you said, at some point, when does the schedule become too overwhelming to the point where maybe they start to disseminate this information somewhere else, like give it to someone else, say like, hey, can you handle this part and like put this out in this day in this way? If we trust you enough, can you do that? Because again, they have a million other things going on, and it's like, I know they want to have brand synergy and all that. Like, I get it. It's extremely important for them. I think you can still do that. You just don't have to necessarily be like the primary presenters and doing it on a grand stage every single time that you want to do it. I think there's other ways you can go about doing it as opposed to just waiting for everything to be perfect at one time. Because like, the Texas Live event, like that was great. That was really fun. That was wonderful. But I just wonder how long was that in the works, or how like long did they plan doing that? And if it was someone else, would they have done it differently or put it in somewhere else, or just in like, hey, here's the city that we already heard about. You heard about it like in April. I'm going to tell you about it in May, instead of like waiting until the end of July to say it.
Well, I think the same could be accomplished from a rock in his workout room, tweeting like he did, RIP Queen Elizabeth or whatever. Like, I think the same thing could be like, hey guys, got some exciting news here. XFL team names, coming your way. And then I don't need Dwayne on the stage somewhere. Any other thoughts on the timeline? I want to talk about your IFL article before I let you go.
Yeah, I mean, look, I totally get the frustration. I get the anxiety over getting all this information. I think at the end of the day, it's going to come out one way or another. But I think it's just more of like, it's about how do you connect with the fans? How do you connect with the media? How do you connect with everybody involved here? And I think maybe there just needs to be more, there doesn't have to be like complete transparency of what's going on, but just a little bit in the know of, okay, here's what's going on. Here's what we're working on. Here's what we really want to tell you this, but we can't, as opposed to radio silence. I think that's what drives people absolutely batty, is when there's just nothing being said whatsoever. And we're kind of left in the dark a little bit. That's all.
They're a fan-friendly league, Andrew. I don't know what I can tell you. They're the most fan-friendly. It did feel like, Wednesday as we record this, Doug Whaley was over in, the NFL's doing the London stuff, and, they're playing at that Tottenham. I can never say the stadium, but they're playing in the Packers and Giants are playing there this weekend. And they're like, oh, Doug Whaley's over here in the UK, like scouting talent. Like we said, talent knows about. I'm like, this is whoever runs the XFL Twitter page, like big middle finger to like everybody. Cause I'm like, it's just very unaware. It's just very unaware. I'm not saying that that's not important and Doug or all that, but it did just feel like, and I tweeted just a child screaming in horror. I'm like, they do not understand like and again, it's 2%. We don't need those 2%, but that's the 2% of people that are wearing your Dragons jerseys out to Mariner games to get people talking about it. So we have it here, courtesy, and I love so much about this. So Andy has a story about XFL News Hub. IFL team owner hints at player pipeline to the XFL, and I'll time code this to segment this out because this is exciting news this week. I love that the team owner of a IFL team, and that they're the Green Bay Blizzard, and they have, which is just, I hate Green Bay just because of Aaron Rodgers, but and they have a podcast called Strictly Business. It's just the most astounding thing to me. What can you tell me that Kathy Treankler, team owner of the IFL's Green Bay Blizzard, said on the podcast?
Yeah, so I found out about this yesterday. This Kathy Treankler individual, the owner of the Green Bay Blizzard in the IFL, who has this not weekly podcast, but semi-frequent podcast, announces on it a couple days ago that the IFL has been in talks with the XFL about potentially allowing their players to be released from their contracts to go play in the XFL. She just announces this. She says it's going to be formally announced on the website at some point on the IFL's website in sometime in the future. And I just found it fascinating that this another like player pipeline information, which seems like, again, pretty pertinent information for a lot of people, especially for those who are super hardcore and following some of these players like Rashad Ross, right? He's from the DC Defenders. He played in the IFL this past season, and he's been going on and on and on about how he wants to rejoin the XFL, which I'm sure he was going to do regardless anyways. But this another potential opening for players to come into the XFL. So she talked about that. And then she also mentioned that they're going to be like combines, and there are going to be coaches from both the IFL and the XFL involved jointly at some point as well. And that information is also going to be on the website, and kind of went on about the mission statement. She also talked about things like the owners in the league were talking about reviving the Arena Football League at some point. That was in discussion, but they may have put that aside for the moment, and instead have decided to focus their resources on putting more partnership with the XFL. And they said that they were considering both the XFL and the USFL, and they ultimately went with the XFL in terms of doing this partnership. So kind of similar to what maybe the NFL Alumni Academy was doing. And I just found it really fascinating that we found out about this on this podcast channel with 144 subscribers, and this podcast itself having 80 viewers. Like, this is really, really deep down there. You had to like go and find this if you really wanted to know this. I got a tip from somebody that I'd met previously that this was being said. And I just was fascinated that it was coming straight from this owner from this league. And I thought that would be very interesting to publish about, because I mean, again, it's more player resources, it's more of a player pool, it's more talent for the XFL to draw from.
A couple of things. Yeah. So owner of the team, not the league, right? So Kathy Treankler, whatever. Yeah. It has 94 views today. So presumably your article is ticking that up from the 80. It does not surprise me that one of the only 3 comments on the video is one of the co-hosts of the USFL podcast, Zach Common. Can you give me more details about why you didn't want to go with the USFL over the XFL? Like, Zach, okay. Like USFL will survive. You're in free agency right now. Like, don't worry about it. But again, what's interesting to me about it is because I believe in your article you said before they could always jump to the NFL or the CFL, but adding the XFL into that mix is interesting, because that's the thing with like fan control football. Even like a lot of these guys signing into the arena leagues, you want to have that out, and you want to know, like, hey, whatever happens, like, I'm not locked into this for the year. Like, I can make a jump. And adding the XFL to that, like you said, in terms of the time of year and probably the ownership there, and maybe the USFL said, hey, we don't want to, we're protecting our players and we don't want to go vice versa. But I think the XFL, even when we talked with, was it Woodson in Arizona, said, like, we are going to be very player friendly in terms of like releasing players from our, now that needs to be said, and I'm sure at some point Mike Mitchell will have like the leaked player contract like he did the USFL. I can't wait for that, like the leaked, Mike Mitchell breaking that down. But it does feel like XFL just in general is trying to be, again, that needs to be said, but trying to be more open with their players jumping ship if they need to, versus the USFL that went back and added clauses in their contract to make it be less accessible.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, in terms of just giving players more options, more opportunities, more chances. Now, this could be seen as like a lateral move, I guess, because it is an alternative league. I say what you want about the IFL in terms of their notoriety and all that. It is a lateral move from the standpoint of it being an alternative football league. So that is something that is important for people to keep in mind. I think it's interesting that you have more alignment here, which is the key word here that I also wanted to focus on, because I think it's fascinating. Here we are 15 months ago debating about, okay, how is the XFL going to align with the CFL? What kinds of things need to change? What are the rules? What are the players going to do? What are the coaches going to do? What are the league owners? What's the idea? How are they going to be able to put this all together? How are they going to have alignment? Obviously, not much really came of it. And here they are actually having the word alignment used by one of the team owners from the IFL and saying, we felt that it was best to align with the XFL. It's like, oh, okay, here we are finally. Like it was like a very long merry-go-round, but here we are. We're finally at like this alignment, sort of cohesion between leagues that probably should have been working together from the first place. But it is interesting that, again, as I was talking about with Mike Mitchell last night, it's just like the XFL is just continuing to like knock on all these doors. It's like this kind of door-to-door salesman of like, hey, we have this thing. Do you want to get involved with it? And I think it's, again, from a business standpoint, them getting involved with this makes a lot of sense as far as like giving more options to these players, being able to move back and forth between the XFL and the IFL. They can do that if they wish. And the thing that I really like too also is the quote from Kathy Treankler about this idea. Like she said in the podcast, I'm going to quote this here. She says, quote, "At the end of the day, this is what these pro leagues are all about. We take serious the athlete, and the athlete should take themselves seriously about getting to the next level." Like they're very much, based on how she was talking about in this podcast, she's very focused on the same thing of just having more opportunities, more ideas for these players. Like maybe that's more money. Maybe it's a different league. Maybe it's a different country. Maybe it's whatever it needs to be for these players, which at the end of the day is something that at least I think us and all the people in the media can at least say we fight for, is just having other options for these players to go with.
Kathy talking strictly business here. Nothing but so according to RookieRoad.com, arena football, IFL players make on average $37,470 per season. I don't know if that's like updated for, copyright 2022. So like XFL average is going to be 45. Obviously, QB salaries above that. So like obviously less, but it is a jump. It would be a jump to go from the IFL to the Arena League, but they're within the same. I think they're probably within the same, sport in terms of like, okay, what are we getting like the rookie, whatever players at? I will say, just speaking of alignment and all this stuff before we go, having lived through the XFL now for 26 months, I think Brett that runs the Facebook group. I hope Brett's listening this deeply into this. Brett really enjoyed Mike Mitchell and I going off on the XFL last week, but having lived through the XFL for 26 months, I absolutely see why the CFL talks did not go anywhere. Because I'm sure they're like, and I'm sure both sides, and they were, but like, I'm sure they're like, we're playing. Like, we're that, you know what I mean? Like, can you imagine, like, knowing what we know about the XFL, like, okay, we're protecting this, and we have this, and we've got to get, Dwayne's got to fly to Dubai, and then we got to bring him back, and we got to do it. Like, I imagine Randy and them were just like, we got it. Like, we've been doing this for 108 years. Like, we don't. I mean, can you imagine this? Like, just knowing now what we know.
I was not even able to imagine it at the time. Like, I felt like I was crazy. Like, I was doing a Rubik's Cube, and someone had taken like the colored stickers and like switched them around, so that I would never be able to solve it. And I was just like, how does this work? And I had like legit conversations with other people about it, were like mildly interested in the idea, and both of us were just like, I'm not sure how this is going to work unless someone fundamentally like restructures their entire model of how they do the games and play the games and the players and like everything structurally has to change from one side in order for it to work. But it is so fascinating that like an idea like that came into the fold. But also we did see the other end of it, of how people react to it, which was not always the most cordial, but it was really interesting how that went about. I have no idea. I don't, and yeah, in hindsight, I don't know if it would ever have worked. Again, I don't know if that would have ever worked in any way, shape, or form. But again, Dwayne and Danny thought that there was something there. I think it was more, I really think at the end of the day, it was more of just kind of sharing business knowledge and ideas. And it was not ever going to get to that point. But I think it was just used as an excuse to sort of exchange ideas and information.
Yeah, I don't know. I support and I want all of this, but I think the quote from Mike Mitchell when the CFL talks dissolved was like, the XFL presented them with ideas and they kept presenting them with more ideas, and the CFL just said no. I think it was the line. Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, I'm sure they're like, and then we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do this, and they're like, bro, like we got to kick off here in June. Like we're going. I don't know. I would. Someday I will self-finance the 30 for 30 of the failed XFL talks. That is my honor. We need to get Dwayne and Danny like more open. I think in like 5 years, whether this XFL even exists or not, like that's what I want. I want the deep dive, the 30 for 30. I will self-finance that. We'll talk with Farhan. We'll talk with you. We'll talk with Arash. We'll come up. We'll do the whole thing. It'll be very fascinating.
Yeah, we'll call Dave Naylor, Jim Baines, all of those guys. I would love to have every single one of them talk about it, because there's it. I mean, it was a 4-month process. It was a legit process. It was deep in there. I really would have loved to get that, and I'll be one of the first to fund it. By the way, I will put some of my capital into that. I want that.
Well, there we go. So, welfare check today. Like I said, big guest next week. I appreciate Andy coming on. Maybe that guest will resurface too. That's the thing. Like, I'm swamped in wedding edits right now, so I appreciate it. I'm like, I don't have time to reach out to 27 more people and try to get someone. So I appreciate Andy. But I thought this was a fruitful conversation today. I think this is one of Andy's best performances on here. I thought 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, whenever you were on, was great as well. I really appreciate that. And people, make sure I'll link the article for the IFL on the YouTube, and then make sure you keep checking out Andy's work and everyone else over at the Hubs and XFL board, the newsroom, and everything else. So That's it. Anything else, Andy? I'll let you go.
No, I'm ready to go back to the bench. So
yeah, when do your Padres play? Mariners play tomorrow or Friday as we listen.
My Padres play tomorrow at about 5:30, I believe, on Friday, and that will be against the Mets. So they're gonna have to go win in New York. So we'll see what happens. But hey, man, this is exciting for both of us. I cannot believe that both of our teams are in at the same time. I never thought it would happen.
It's exciting. I know. If I didn't have weddings, I would fly to Toronto and like pants Arash, because he's going to be at the whatever. I don't know where the Blue Jays play, Rogers Center, whatever. But I would go pants Arash and then tie his shoes and do everything else. So, Andy, thank you again. We'll see you next time.
Absolutely, Reed.
Well, I'm excited today. We have two-time Grey Cup champion, CFL Hall of Famer, namesake of the Cornish Trophy, Jon Cornish here. How are you doing, sir?
Doing very well. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. I think I reached out to our mutual friend Jim Mullen months ago, preseason. I said, hey, I want to get Jon on, talk a little CFL. We finally connected. I really appreciate it. How are you doing? How are your thoughts on the CFL season thus far?
I thought sort of early mid-season, that was a peak CFL all time, I would say. Quarterbacks were in the groove. We had Nathan Rourke, dominating with BC, Winnipeg just doing the thing they've been doing for the last few years. And then things have changed. I think we've seen sort of a resurgent Montreal, Toronto, still on top of the East, but it's a tenuous lead. My favorite team this season, outside the Stamps, of course, Hamilton, but they just haven't had it together. So it's been a very exciting league. I'm looking forward to the playoffs. Will be fun, but next year it feels like the people sort of know who their quarterbacks are, and I think it'll be a really good next few years.
Well, it was weird. And the last season was kind of herky jerky and coming off. And then even coming into this season, we have the CVAs and all that stuff. What the hell happened to Toronto this week against, it seemed like dominant team in the East got smacked around by the Stamps, right? What did you make of Toronto?
I think Toronto got to learn what it's like to come West and play a team in the West. It's easy to, go into Toronto, the home field advantage at their field doesn't necessarily exist. I mean, you need lots of fans there, and they've done a better and better job of filling up their stadium. But, there's always been a little bit of power differential between the East and the West, and I think they certainly got to see it last night. I mean, obviously, without their starting running back in Harris, but, you can't have that many turnovers in the game. Their special teams wasn't too hot either, and that leads to losses.
It's just weird. I just could never tell, like, week to week. I could never put money on the CFL. I know the big single game sport. We're really trying to push that because, like you said, we have Toronto coming out. Was it 2 points at one point? I was working last night, but horrendous score, and it just seems like. I mean, even BC, like, it feels like we're going to the playoffs some weeks. Feels like we're not. There's not a lot of consistency week to week here.
Well, and that's one of the things we're dealing with young quarterbacks. McLeod Bethel-Thompson, he's been the upcoming guy. Like I've liked him as a quarterback for a long time. He just had a bad game, and that happens sometimes. And it's not the first time I've seen Toronto come into Calgary and lay an egg.
Are you an MBT guy?
Yeah.
You like him?
Like I've liked him forever. I've been waiting for him to like really, punch through that last ceiling and truly become a CFL great. But when we look at the stat line from yesterday, I want to get excited about the guy, but he threw 50% passing yesterday. Less than 200 yards. Like and with such a pass happy team like Toronto, it has to be better than that.
It's, we talked a lot here on the show, and the level of quarterbacking. Obviously, we had Caleros and Rourke kind of is that exceptional level, and then it really is just a drop off after that. I mean, even Bo this season with the Stamps, and now we're going with Jake Mayer, who seems to certainly be the future there. Are you concerned long term future quarterbacking in the league, and as guys continue going south, and maybe the CFL not having as much choice?
It's always something that's discussed. But the reality is we had a lot of quarterback injuries at the start of the season, right? We lost Jeremiah Masuli off the bat. Dane Evans, the guy that had gotten his team to the Grey Cup the last few years. Where did he go? Where's the guy that we remember? Who's this guy that's playing this year? And then actually more recently, we've seen that Dane Evans. So across the league, I think quarterbacking, there's some, let's say, surprises. I know Arbuckle, there's a lot more expected from him off the bat. I think he's settling in quite a bit in Ottawa. But the reality is, like, those first few games were not kind to our quarterbacks, and there's been some reshuffling, injuries, long-term injuries. Sort of now, I feel like people are starting to settle in, get comfortable.
I actually had a break yesterday, watched Edmonton now break the streak for the longest, North American, whatever it is, sports, home, whatever. Thoughts on that and everything going on there?
Montreal, Trevor Harris, he's been playing better and better. And I think he's always been a great quarterback. He just, a little bit of inconsistency there has held him back. He's brought his team to Grey Cup multiple times. But let's talk about Taylor Cornelius, right? Like, here's a guy that, just like Jake Mayer is sought to be a sort of steady Eddie kind of player. That game yesterday was mind-blowing for me. In the last 9 minutes of the game, we saw a complete flip. Edmonton was in scoring distance. Like, they were 9-10 yards away from the goal line. Throw a pick, goes all the way back. So a complete reversal. Score of 18-17 for Edmonton. About to go up another 7 points. No, now they're down 6 points. And then they have a bunch more turnovers. Like, they had 3 turnovers in 8 minutes. And that's not the sign of a team that knows how to win. And that's what we look for. When you look at a team like Winnipeg, right? For whatever reason, they got the right players in the right spots. They have just continually been able to, overcome that adversity at the end of the game and come away with the win. We didn't see that from Edmonton in any game this year, and it's because that level of flux that they've experienced up there in terms of their roster, having guys come in like almost 50%, 70% of the roster gone. The people that started the season are not there anymore. You need consistency. You need people that are like sort of those institutional guys that are, oh yeah, we were winning, back in 2015, 2016. Those guys aren't here anymore. So this new Edmonton team definitely needs to find its identity.
Yeah, I tweeted, I said, Edmonton sure doesn't want to win at home when they have the pick six. And I said, they just had the big Cornelius extension. I said, Edmonton's going to be asking for their money back on this one. That was because I've defended him because we watched him play a little bit in the XFL before he came up.
Yeah, certainly. But we have who's the rookie quarterback in Edmonton? He was injured for a little bit there. Trey Ford. I really think Trey's the next generation of guys. He had a quarter maybe of play earlier in the season. They went with Cornelius, but I think Trey Ford, he has that perfect combination of speed, accuracy with his throws, maybe a little bit too aggressive in terms of guys. If you're a quarterback in the CFL, don't go try to run like a running back. It will not work out well for you.
No, it seems really scramble happy. And then, like I said, taking hits, maybe unnecessary hits. I mean, I'm someone that, we just saw Trey Lance here in San Francisco do that here a couple weeks ago. And I know there's a way to be mobile and push the pile. And I think Fajardo has been guilty of that too. Sometimes I'm just going all the way and I'm just going to push my way through. It's like, it is okay to kind of slide or step out if you need to.
Oh yeah. And that's what we saw BC doing yesterday, or the other day. Like BC had such a good game. You saw their quarterbacks doing amazing things. Vernon Adams he had a few nice runs, and then at the very end, just nice little slide. Guys, this is CFL. As a running back in the CFL, I would go down sometimes. Okay, I'm gonna get tackled, and that's one of the things I try to talk with when I talk with players, like existing professionals. Guys, sometimes you just got to go down. Don't try to do all this crazy fancy dance stuff. You're going to get yourself hurt. The longer you dance around, the more people are going to roll in there. But I think BC's actually been impressive. Of course, when it came against the Red Blacks, but a guy like Vernon Adams, that was a great trade. But I've always loved Antonio Pipkin and having him sort of as a change of pace quarterback go in there, get some runs. He had a nice long quarterback sneak, let's call it, in the last game. It's nice to have sort of that level of sort of who's going to come at us, and I know they certainly benefited. I would say almost a resurgent James Butler. I know maybe he got nicked up early there, but you start off the season, with an incredible game, 4 touchdowns, and then just sort of fade out. And now I think they've been putting him to better use. I actually really like James Butler out of the backfield. He's a really good receiver. And then, of course, you got my wife's favorite member of the team, Lucky Whitehead. She always says, the guys in the CFL that have the dreads, they have a different level of tune. Like she's sick, right? So, sick, you grow your hair. So, I love seeing what Lucky Whitehead play. I know I actually think BC has the best offensive roster, hands down, in CFL.
Well, I agree with that as well. And they're my team. I call them America's CFL team here on the podcast because we're broadcasting out of Seattle. But we played like such trash last week, right, against Calgary. We beat up, and I want to talk about La Police here in the minute, but we beat up Ottawa. I'm like, who cares? Because we're never going to win when it matters. Yeah, we can beat Edmonton, and we can beat Ottawa, and we can beat Toronto. Like, we can't beat Winnipeg. I mean, Calgary, it seems like they have our number. I mean, what do you make of BC here now having clinched a playoff spot?
I was really hoping BC would give up here. Something here. I know when we talk about the last few weeks of the schedule, we're looking at a sort of sprint to the finish. I mean, you got Montreal and Toronto in the East. You got sort of Winnipeg sort of locked up, but then we have BC and the Stampeders. That number 2 spot is uncertain across the league, and that's what we want to see at the end of the year. I think. When we talk about BC, I think a level of who are they today? And we've talked about it earlier in the podcast. Sometimes your quarterback is the guy that determines that. And I know Vernon Adams is a younger guy. He's still, how am I going to get mentally prepared for this game? And then you saw what they did when they came to Calgary 2 weeks ago, right? They came away with a win in Calgary. And we gave up 2 against BC in Calgary. Of course, the first one was with Nathan Rourke. I think we're looking at the BC team that is probably starting to, okay, guys, we don't got Nathan here. What are we going to do to make sure we get the second place in the West? And, like the Red Blacks have certainly had their struggles that they're coming around. Nick Arbuckle threw 75%. Like he's maybe back to where he was expected to be. But I think the biggest thing with Ottawa, we need to see some level of like will and want to win. Like when we look at their defensive like sort of performance, like who's their guy? Patrick Levels, like a DB. Like it just they don't have that guy that's going to bring everything together on their defense. And I'm not sure if it's a roster moves, a quarterback, coaching moves, or whatever they need to do. But there's something needs to give on that team, and we haven't seen sort of that. Just like Edmonton, we got to see them do something before the end of the season.
A lot of Paul Police here getting let go, not even getting to finish the season out. Surprised on that front, and then also like, is that enough here? Or is there more wholesale changes needed?
I think it's a start. I mean, obviously their season's probably done. It was unfortunate. Paul Police, I thought he's a great CFL commentator, a good offensive coordinator. But as we've seen, when he comes into the head coach role, teams haven't seen too much success in that. So he might be sort of rotating back down to that offensive coordinator position. I mean, that certainly worked out for him. But, being in the head coach chair might not be the thing. I'm not sure, when it comes to the roster, they've had, like I said, that flex at quarterback, like getting a guy injured here, having to rotate, trade, like, that's not the thing you want to see in terms of consistency. A quarterback is the leader of the team in the CFL. And if you don't have that guy, you aren't doing anything else. And I think certainly maybe Nick's the guy, but we have to see him be protected, and we have to see Ottawa's defense, just show up or come, start to exist even.
It's just hard. We've been told a lot, CFL and quarterbacking, it takes a couple years, right? I mean, you see a freak like Nathan Rourke come in, kind of set the world off, but, like Cornelius, maybe kind of getting it, but then you have someone like Arbuckle, like I don't know how many like chances we're doing, and we're moving him and we're moving people around. It feels like that carousel sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, most certainly. Like let's talk about Nick Arbuckle. Calgary St. Peter's, Bo goes down, Nick's the guy, carries us through in 2018 season. Against a decent season. 2019, he's playing most of the games, right? He had 2,000 yards in 2019, right? Great play then. He goes to Toronto, gets 7 games, starts off the season here in Edmonton. 5 games there, not looking too good. 8 interceptions for 2 touchdowns. And then in Ottawa, sort of actually seeing that same level of pick to touchdown ratio. Not a good look for Nick Arbuckle. But like, I think, I was talking about him the other day. Was he the benefit of the Calgary Stampeder system? Or does he still have something there that he's missing? I mean, we've certainly seen Dane Evans this year. Like, oh, this isn't the Dane Evans we saw in years past. Where's that one? I think that these guys do have potential, but like you said, we need to see a level of consistency that we haven't seen from these quarterbacks before we start looking elsewhere. And just going back to another point you made earlier, I think the CFL is very attractive to young quarterbacks. We see a lot of quarterbacks coming to camp. They have opportunities and stuff. But, how can we make the CFL sort of more known to the down south? Because I know that a lot of those guys, they'll go in NFL to make some money. I don't think there's a more enviable position than the backup quarterback. But then you see a guy like Bo Levi Mitchell, who came up here because he wanted to be the best. He wanted to set some records. And the same with Dave Dickinson. We've seen great quarterbacks up here, and when I think back to when I played around the 2011 era, we had Henry Burrs, Anthony Cavillo, Ricky Ray, right? Like Travis Lulay, like great quarterbacks. I would love to see more of that.
So two things. So first, the Bo, him, obviously being benched. I've seen okay, are we trading Bo after the season? What are we doing? I mean, Jake certainly seems to be the future there. He was on our show whatever this season, whatever time frame that was. Like, thoughts on Bo and everything happening now with your old team?
Yeah, Bo's a good friend, but if I was just to theorize as a long tenure, so I have more tenure than Dave Dickinson, Hoffnagel on the Stampeders. I am still technically an employee of the Calgary Stampeders, right? As game day ambassador, a job I've almost done as long as I played. I've seen people come and go. Bo is one of those guys. I would say differs from let's say a Henry Burris or Joffrey Reynolds, where they had a person, an heir apparent, come into their roles. Bo, I think we'll see a situation just like San Francisco with Garoppolo, where you have a quarterback that could go elsewhere, or you just take a little pay cut, stick around, and you could probably add another 2-3 years to your career in a place, and you don't have to uplift your family and do all this crazy stuff. I think there was an expectation for Bo that, sort of those, 2019 injury, 2020, like that he would recover from those. And I think we're at a place now where, does he need that time to additionally heal his shoulder? Like having some answers around that would probably be helpful for Bo to know what his next steps are.
A couple quick questions. I don't want to hold you too long. I appreciate your time on here. With Jake, how bullish are you on his prospects going forward? I mean, he played good last year in kind of relief, whatever, Bo, and he was out now, obviously taking over this year.
Yeah, I want to see Jake, grow, continue to grow. Like he's been very steady Eddie this season, and I think that's important. The Stampeders don't need somebody to go out there and be a world breaker, right? Like that's not what's required, but we do need somebody that's going to be consistent. I think when we talk about Jake Mayer, like, across the 2 BC games, he basically had the same stat line, but in the most recent one, with the win, he didn't have any touchdowns. In the loss, he had 3 touchdowns. So what's sort of Jake Meyer, like, what can we expect from him? I mean, this last game we had 2 picks. So just some probably growing pains there. I think he has the arm. Under Dave and Huff's tutelage, he has the football knowledge. I'm looking forward to him continuing to grow and having an opportunity to start next year and sort of preparing for a season with that in mind, and then seeing how he grows from there.
It's just exciting. I mean, we talk quarterback, everything here. Calgary's going from one, all-star Hall of Fame quarterback here and now, and we're set up again where all these other teams are like, what the hell's going on? Okay, we're trading for, Dane Evans again or whatever. It just must be nice to be Calgary right now.
Well, it's always been nice to be Calgary. 17 years we've made it to a playoff spot. Second longest streak in the CFL. And I think that's a testament to the guys, in our front office, coach's office, making sure the next guy up is ready. We're finding the third guy up, so we have the next guy ready. Like there's something to be said for the level of consistency the Calgary Stampeders have experienced, and I think we are uniquely positioned in the CFL because we have had that just retaining of the institutional knowledge that has made us so good for a long period of time. And, we recently brought in a guy I played with in 2007, Jay McNeil, going to be our vice president. We're thinking about what happens when Huff wants to retire. Okay, we move him in, maybe to give Dave some GM responsibilities. These things are processes that we are preparing for over long periods of time. And I think it really is it's an honor to be part of the Calgary Stampeders. When we look across the CFL and, tumultuous ownership relationships and, coaching staff turnover, those kinds of things. I mean, I've been hanging out with the same guys. I know some guys would love to go to Toronto or other spots, but it's truly been an honor to be part of the Calgary Stampeders.
Yeah, I hate it. As a BC fan, I hate it. I wish you guys would just have it fall apart and have a dumpster fire there. We talked earlier before I let you go, trying to attract more fans in the South, south of the border, right? Obviously, us broadcasting from America and doing our part on this side of the border. I mean, where do you see the CFL's place here and like moving forward? What would you like to see? I mean, there's always all these conversations about, growing the game and everything else.
Yeah. So, I think it starts at home. The CFL actually gets really good traction in the States. You talk about ESPN2, like it's football, guys. It's exciting football. The product on the field is good, especially when you have guys like Rourke. His brother's going to be coming to the league, right? Like we're going to see the epoch of great Canadian quarterbacks. And that's where I truly feel the future of the CFL is. Yeah, relying on these guys down south. No, let's use the guys that were born here. But when we talk about the Canadian population, we talk about the CFL's demographics, the people in the seats at games. It's two different things. We need our demographics to reflect the Canadian demographic. We are the Canadian Football League. We can't survive if we cater to a diminishing 50% of the population, right? If all of our fans brought their kids to the games, we would still see a shrinking population because we have this whole subset of people that haven't been reached out to. How many CFL stars are showing up at Diwali celebrations and various Chinese cultural celebrations. Like we need to be out in the community and sharing the story of the Calgary the Calgary Stampeders, the BC Lions. That's one thing I've always loved about the CFL. These guys are all community service oriented. But how can we reorient to that so it's like the broader community rather than the existing partners that we have? And I think that's the biggest thing, that outreach. I would say like every Canadian immigrant should get two CFL tickets, guaranteed. Right, so that starts at home. When you talk about marketing sales, right, we're talking about 50 to 60% sold, right? So when we talk about marketing sales, we're talking about sponsorships, people in seats, like that whole shebang, right? The CFL is doing well. I mean, people watch it, but it's such an exciting experience to be out of the game. So I think there's a few things going on. We need more people in the seats. Our international coverage is growing. I think there's value in that. But I think the number one thing is, when I watch AFL, so I'm talking about Australian football, they fill up seats, right? That's their game. They might not have as easily exported NFL there, but it's certainly there. We have to re-engender that love for the game here in Canada first. And then, these Canadians love their game. I'll tune in and watch and see what's happening. That's sort of the follow-up to that.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I know, having dealt with fans and whatever, there's a sense of like, this isn't good enough. Sometimes I get from CFL, we feel like we're all good all summer. Then NFL starts. It's like, oh, well, this stupid game. Like, I would just be more proud of it. I think CFL draws incredibly well, having tracked like USFL ratings here in the States with, how much larger our population is. And in terms of the ratings, some of those games got being comparable to CFL games with, much smaller. Like, I would just be proud of that. I see a lot. It was all good all summer here until about fall. And then it's like, oh, this like poo-poo. We don't need. It's like, no, just be proud of the CFL. Like, let's focus on that and not kind of drawing these comparisons.
Yeah, I've always thought the comparisons are like, guys, like Australian Football League is a different game. Like these games all have their nuances. And when you look at the CFL and how games sort of play out, right, it doesn't matter what the score is. The last 3 minutes are going to be anybody's game. As we saw even in this Toronto game. Yeah, Toronto was 14-2 in the fourth quarter. That could have been determined in the last minute. Right. So like the excitement, the energy that takes place at the game, it's incredible. I have had sort of, top to down knowledge of what a game actually looks like. And it's not just this little window of people on the field. It's experiential. I think we have a lot of great things to share. And hopefully we can continue to make that outreach so people actually understand. Yeah, it's such a Canadian thing to do. It's like, oh yeah, we like our CFL, but here's the NFL. That guys, like, they're two different things. Stop treating them like I'm only going to watch this football. Like, guys, I love football. I watch college football. I watch CFL football. I watch NFL football. I mean, everybody has limited amounts of time, but I think there's a place for each one of those games.
Well, we'll get you in some XFL football here come February. Maybe we'll get you in the game for that. I really appreciate your time on a Sunday here, taking time to talk CFL. Jon Cornish, thank you so much. I'm glad we can finally connect.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Reed. All the best with the podcast.
Well, I am thrilled today. We have Tim Baines. I can't remember if you've been on once already this season, but I think this is a fourth-time appearance from the Ottawa Sun. How are you doing, sir?
4 times?
I think so.
Like, really, the pay's got to get better. 4th time? What's going on?
Well,
I got nothing better to do in Ottawa?
I spent the morning, I applied for my CFL Grey Cup credentials. I've been talking with Daryl Davis, finding the perfect spot in Regina to, do our live show. I am assuming that the Ottawa Red Blacks will not be at the Grey Cup. Will you be at the Grey Cup?
What? They're not going to be? They've got 3 wins. Okay. Yeah. Well, they're going to run the table, win their last 4 games. They're going to end up 7-11. And the craziest thing ever is going to happen. A 7-11 team is going to win the Grey Cup. You heard it here first. Okay, maybe not. Okay. Well, will I be at the Grey Cup? Yeah, it's a national party. Of course, I'm going to be there.
I had a call today and then email and then a call and then email. I got a pretty good spot here. I'm working on getting set up at. So I think you guys will be happy here for the live show. But so starting out, obviously you cover Ottawa. I was really curious thinking about this, knowing you were coming on. Like, is it better to be like the Jeff Hamilton of the world? We cover Winnipeg. They win all the time. It's boring. Or do you prefer the grind that is covering the Ottawa Red Blacks week in, week out?
Well, if to be Jeff Hamilton, I'd have to be like 5'2". I'd have to grow a beard, and I have to get really angry and cantankerous all the time. I don't know. I mean, certainly it's better when you're covering a winning football team because it's not a pressure, but there's maybe an anxiety that goes with covering a team that's not doing well because you try not to be negative all the time. It's tough not to be negative when things are going so wrong. But I think when you write negative stuff all the time, when they're so bad and the coach should be fired, and that's the angle every day, you get caught up in it and you're just overwhelmed with the negativity. So I've just tried to, I call a spade, and when they're bad, I have to say that. But I try to stay away from that every day and try to focus more on the players and maybe their lives than what's going on in the football field, because it ain't been pretty.
So obviously, Paul Police, I mean, even last season, I mean, not a great outing this year. Were you surprised at coming down here? I mean, the loss to BC, it's not even the end of the season yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of things that happen are surprising this year. We saw what happened. There were 3-15 under Coach Rick Campbell in 2019. 2021, new head coach Paul LaPolice, 3-11, and new general manager comes in, and there are wholesale changes, a lot of new players brought in, and it'd be pretty hard to argue. Like on paper, they certainly the changes they made, they're significantly better of a roster than they were a year ago, but the results didn't come, and you can make an argument that certainly I think there have been probably 3 games now where there was no way they were going to win, but competitive in a lot of games and could have come out of weeks 1. They could have come out 2-0. Certainly they were a better team in week 1 against Winnipeg and then lost the second game, a game they could have won. And there's a lot of coulda, shoulda, wouldas. And unfortunately, coulda, woulda, shouldas don't win you football games. You got to go out and play a full football game, borrowing all the old cliches. But you really, really need a lot of things to go right for you. And at the end of the day, some of the decisions that were made by the head coach, combined with a lack of success, cost Paul LaPolice's job.
I can't remember because I know, and obviously with the Red Blacks going in the last year with the GM and all that, so it's been very tumultuous last week. And I can't remember if it was like on Rod Peterson's show or something talking. When you have a team, a lot of issues, it's way easier, like, get rid of the GM, get rid of you can get rid of one coach versus, like, we got 18 players or whatever we got to figure out. Like, do you feel like that was the case here? And I mean, them bringing in the interim head coach, I mean, is that really like an upgrade? I mean, I know we're just making do till the end of the season, but is there a better option than Paul LaPolice out there?
I guess we're going to find out. I mean, at some point, this is a move certainly the team thought about when things were going wrong at the beginning of the season. They lost their starting quarterback, Jeremiah Masoli, in week 4, but they really started the season off as well as they played at times. The results weren't showing. So this was something the Red Blacks have been mulling for a long period of time. They won a couple games and all of a sudden, okay, things are better. I think the danger, especially with social media, is certainly a lot of fans were calling for the coach to be fired a long, long time ago. And I think there's a danger in, I don't want to downplay the importance of a fan base, but there's a danger in all of a sudden, well, the fans are calling for us to fire the head coach, we better. Because if you look at the history of sports, anytime a team goes through a slump, fans are calling for the coach's ouster. Like, it's the coach. And if you also look back in history at the number of that happening, number of times that's happened, and teams have rebounded and come back under that coach. I mean, it can't be a gut reaction to what the outcry from your fan base. In this case, it was much more the team was patient. They waited and waited, and finally the shoe dropped, and it was enough. Enough is enough. And I think we saw, I mean, there maybe at a certain point when things aren't going right, the coach loses that trust within the dressing room. And you've got to have the players. The players don't have to like you or love you, but they sure better respect you. And I'm not sure that was there. There was a total buy-in on that anymore.
Was that a vibe you got from covering it? That's interesting that they had lost faith in Paul.
I think anytime a team is losing, there's frustration. So the frustration's got to be directed at something. I think it wasn't only with the head coach. There's just, again, when a team is not doing well, it's a team sport. I'm not sure there are fingers being pointed, but I think there's just a boiling over of frustration, and ultimately, I guess you got to point the anger at someone, and the head coach in this case bore the brunt of it.
It's interesting talking about you bringing up social media and fan outlets. I mean, the whole first part of our episode today is talking about, XFL and, fan frustration for different measures, right? And obviously this is, real jobs and people getting let go, but it is that fine line of like the whole thing nowadays. Like, we're so accessible in social media, and we're, we want the fans, and especially the CFL that's built on like our league and our fans, and it's your thing and all that. And then to have to, accept that, but then, like you said, analytically look at the situation and say, how do we want to best handle this for the team?
Yeah, I find as much as I try to stay active on social media, I post my stories there because I want people to read the coverage, want people following me. But in general, and it's not just a Red Blacks thing or a CFL thing. I mean, it's really, in large part, I find Twitter, especially, it's a cesspool of negativity. And especially when things are going wrong, it's everybody's looking to point fingers. And I'm not saying when you're a losing football team that you don't deserve people, an angry fan base. I think you do. But I can tell you that as a fan of several teams, including the Toronto Maple Leafs, who haven't won a Stanley Cup since 1967, I don't seek out social media to go and vent out my frustration. Are there frustrations? Sure. But am I going to go out and start lashing out? I just find, I don't know how people do it because, again, I would just get so worked up. It would just make I think it's just bad for your mental health. If that's what you're doing is you're spending your time on social media, lashing out at different people or different things. I just don't think that's a positive way or constructive way to spend your day. And I think some people, that's what some people have become. That's what they spend their day. And it's full of negativity. So let's hope that the new Ottawa Red Blacks bring some positive energy about, because, at this point, we could use anything positive.
So obviously Bob Dice taking over. He was special teams, right, coordinator, and that generally, I think, makes sense, right? You bring in someone, familiar with kind of all the different players, interim after the season. Any idea where they go from here? I mean, obviously way too early, but like I said, you get rid of La Police. I mean, is there a long list of people signing up to I want to coach the Red Blacks right now?
Well, I think there will be. I think first we'll see how Bob Dice does. I mean, he's a former head coach. And I can assure you, the players, we talk about respect and love. There's a long line of players that love playing for Coach Bob Dice. Talking to linebacker Avery Williams today, and he talked about, first of all, he said he's the kind of guy you'd run a 40-yard dash for in a 30-yard room. And the other quote was from Bob Dice. He said a few years ago, Bob Dice told him, he says, we want to be not the type of team that eats with utensils. We want to eat with our hands. So basically, he's looking for that work ethic. And I think there's a lot of, as I said, respect and love. So if things go well, I mean, Bob Dice is a guy that really should be in serious contention if he wants the job, and potentially could be the next head coach. Having said that, I'm sure there are a lot of people around the league who are in coordinator positions that would really like an opportunity to be a head coach. So I think the one thing you will see, and I'm pretty sure of this, is you will not see the next head coach also be it / offensive coordinator. The two jobs need to be distinct. And I think that was one of the things with Paul LaPolice. I think it was overwhelming to have both positions. And I think you need to pay attention to each one. So I'm pretty sure there will be an offensive coordinator next year, and the head coach will not be also doing those duties.
Last question for the Red Blacks, and I do want to get your thoughts on kind of, because I'm curious your thoughts on these other matchups. Was it 4 games left? I mean, are we just kind of getting by here? I mean, and letting him go, before the end of the season also seems weird, right? We go through all this. I mean, any thoughts just on that and the timing and before the end of the season and what they're going to do here at the last little bit?
I think it had just become with Lapo. I think it had just become too much. I mean, there was, again, I think you want to see what you've got, and you want to see the players performing to the full potential. And I guess that the thought was that you weren't going to see that. And let's see what happens if we put a new voice in the room, if there's a new voice for the players to listen to. So it's almost like, what have we got to lose? And I think as long as they were in contention, we talk about the crazy East Division, where it's possible a team with 6 wins, possible, or 7 wins could get into the playoffs. So I think as long as the thought was we're still alive, Paul LaPolice, at least as an offensive coordinator, is the best guy we have to call the plays. They did not want to pull the plug, but I think the BC game really showed that they're not on a par with some teams right now. They just were, in my mind, were never in that game, and we'll see. They've got 4 games coming up: 2 against Montreal, 2 against Hamilton. If you're going to win 4 games, it's probably best to be against East opponents. So, go out and play the games. Let's see what happens. They beat Montreal last time they were in Montreal. Let's see what happens on Monday.
Speaking of BC, curious your thoughts on America's CFL team here. We come in, we beat up the Red Blacks, whatever. That doesn't do anything for me because we just got our asses handed to us by Calgary. And I know Vernon looked decent in the first game, did not look good the second. I was filming the wedding, and I literally was filming the toast of the wedding, and I had my phone on, and I'm watching Vernon Adams throw incompletions. But thoughts on the Toronto matchup? Anything with BC? Any thoughts on the matter in general?
I think you've got a problem. Like the CFL. I know you love the CFL, but wow. Is there some kind of CFL Anonymous or something to cure you of this? With the BC Lions, I mean, I think they're expecting Nathan Rourke back. We see what Nathan Rourke really means to the team, and certainly they're going to miss Brian Burnham as well. So get healthy, and there's a lot of time. They've got another month left in the season. If they can get Nathan Rourke back and Brian Burnham, and they're as good as anybody in the league. But you just see what Rourke and his development as a quarterback has been to that team, and it's just nothing against Vernon Adams, but you see a big difference. We saw a big difference when Rourke was behind center for sure.
Vernon in BC, better than expected, worse than expected?
Again, he's only, 3 weeks into the system. I don't know that I had expectations. I think Vernon Adams is a pretty good quarterback, and he's probably a better option than what they had. You just need Vernon Adams to be kind of a caretaker. Again, if you expect, and I don't know the timeline, if you expect Nathan Rourke back in 3 weeks or a month, you just need Vernon Adams to go in and keep them in games. And, it may not be a first place finish. You just finish in second or third, and that gives you a chance. You got to finish in a playoff spot to have a chance. So this could be setting up. You just need Vernon Adams to come in and not make big mistakes.
I just hate it because we lost to Like, we had everything in the world and we got our asses handed to us by Winnipeg. So I'm like, what the hell is, like, what are we doing here?
Well, it's all regular season. As we've seen in the CFL, it's all about the playoffs.
Okay.
There's still time. Don't throw yourself off a bridge. Like, it's okay. It's okay.
So we have Red Blacks, Montreal. Oh, because that's Canadian Thanksgiving, right? On the 10th. Is that what's going on? Okay.
It is. So hopefully they don't serve up a turkey in that game. Hopefully it's a good game. I mean, I'm spending my Thanksgiving Monday in Montreal. There'd be no turkey for me. Maybe a sandwich or something at the game. But I'm looking forward to it. I want to see what this team can bring to the table and how they finish out this stretch, because 3-11 is not very good. And I don't know if you can finish what you need to finish to at least show some spark. I mean, you need to win 2 or 3 games down the stretch. And I guess it starts Monday, and hopefully we can see some signs of life from an offense that really, over the past 3 years in Ottawa, it's the main source of frustration for fans. Well, other than the fact that they've lost 21 of 22 games at home, which is it's unthinkable. I'm not even sure how that's possible. But the fact that the offense, they seem to be behind 10-0 before the offense shows any signs of life. So I think they really need to find signs of life, and they need to show signs of life early in the game rather than waiting till they're 10 or 14 points behind.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of, the Edmonton here now on the road again. Watch Edmonton come in and blow the doors off Winnipeg here after.
Well, they're not going to win at home, so they might as, like the Red Blacks. I can't explain it. How can you be so bad at home and then occasionally on the road win? Like, isn't it an advantage to play in front of home fans? It is, right?
I was watching. I had a little bit of a break on Saturday, and I was watching that. And I like Cornelius. He played in the XFL, and I know he's not the biggest Edmonton. I don't think all Edmonton people overwhelmingly love Taylor Cornelius. I thought, man, they're going to ask for their money back after this extension, because it's like they just they hate winning at home. I mean, there's no other way around it. I mean, Victor Queen must be just banging his head against the wall.
Remember as well that the pieces of paper that these guys sign extensions on or contracts with really aren't worth that much, because usually they're not guaranteed contracts. Sometimes these guys get a little bit of a bonus. But if they wanted to, they could walk away from Taylor Cornelius next year before the contract ever kicked in. So, with Edmonton, you never know. It's the shiny new toy. What do they find in the offseason? I think Taylor Cornelius can be a decent enough CFL quarterback. How many good quarterbacks are there in the CFL right now? How many franchise quarterbacks are in the CFL right now?
Well, exactly, and it was I can't remember. It was posted today on Twitter and Facebook. It was former CFL head coach talking about the dink and dunk and how it's killing the CFL. And I go, well, absolutely. And they go, oh, well, what about Zach Collaros? I go, that's 1 of 9. I mean, Rourke's out, but otherwise, it's 7 or 8 teams that dink and dunk down the field. I mean, there's really not a lot of big playmakers right now. I mean, every person I talk to every week on the podcast talks about the lack of CFL quarterback play right now.
Yeah, Zach Collaros is pretty hard to argue against a guy who's won 2 straight Grey Cups. It doesn't matter how they get it done. If you're winning Grey Cups doing what you're doing, keep doing it.
Thoughts on Saskatchewan here before we get out of here? I mean, Ticats seem to have a little bit of life. Everyone hates Cody. All I see every week is Dickinson yelling at players and then apologizing for it. I mean, I don't understand this whole, and I'll be in Regina. Maybe I'll understand more with feet on the ground. I don't understand this whole team and media surrounding the Saskatchewan Roughriders.
I don't know how to explain it. I don't know. I mean, that's a team that, again, you look at, and maybe they should be better. And the quarterback takes a lot of flack from the fan base. He was a guy that a couple of years ago, I thought he was going to be the next big thing. I really, really thought Cody Fajardo was going to be like one of the best CFL quarterbacks. He hasn't risen to that level, and if anything, is maybe taken a step or two back. I don't see him enough. I don't know why, but again, I thought he was a guy with a great amount of potential. It'll be an interesting offseason for Saskatchewan for sure. We'll see what happens with the coaching staff, but quarterback wise, do they move on? And we keep hearing Bo Levi Mitchell. It's going to be, it's still a ways away, but it's going to be an interesting CFL offseason in terms of, I think there's going to be interesting turnover maybe on some coaching staffs and certainly some players changing places.
Yeah. Do you really see wholesale changes in Saskatchewan here if they don't make a run?
I don't know. It's a football team that if they play, I mean, especially if they don't make the playoffs, what do you do? I think he's a good head coach. I think he's a good coach, but I don't know how patient the ownership, I don't know how patient the people above the coach are. So I don't know. It's all about, it's a what have you done for me lately game. And sometimes good coaches don't have jobs.
It just always, just like I said, just so much drama out of there. And you have the Marino stuff and you have all this discipline and it just, I don't know. It just felt like they've just carried a lot of like baggage all year. And like I said, every story I read about, is Rob Vanstone, yelling at the Rough Riders or the Dickinson apologizing for yelling at the Rough Riders. It just always seems like I just am not seeing that. And with everything that like BC has gone through this year, I don't see those stories. I don't see those stories with Montreal with all of their stuff and as crazy as it's been. Like it only seems like it's Regina that's coming out of.
Well, and Ottawa.
Yeah, I mean, I guess now, but I mean, you're more tuned into that probably. I mean, you're saying that the locker room and Paul had lost the locker room and all that. I mean, maybe it's just the circles I see that get posted in the lot. I feel like every week I'm seeing like negativity coming out of for a team that is doing better than a lot of the teams in the CFL right now.
Right. You're only allowed to have drama if you either are the Rough Riders or a team that used to be called the Rough Riders. Like it's restricted to Rough Riders, one word. Like how great! And I'm so happy we've moved beyond that. There are still some fans that would like Ottawa's team to be the Rough Riders, with two word Rough Riders, not one word Rough Riders. Yeah, so the CFL where we can name two teams, they can have the same nickname. So imagine like the two Vikings, be the Minnesota Vikings and the something else Vikings in the NFL, like two different teams. Spell them differently though. Change it up. It's pretty crazy.
VYKIN or
something. Sure. Change it up.
I do hate the Red Blacks. I don't like that franchise.
You don't like the franchise or the name?
I don't like the name and the whole identity of that. I don't.
Do you like the people who cover the team anyway?
Yes, I like that. No, I like everything. I like the players. I like Sean Burke. I like. I mean, I like Lapo. I like Tim Baines. The covers.
Right.
All that. But I don't. I mean, and I know Jenna, a long time fan. Let me get your take on this. So we have. This is curious. So so XFL, right? We're getting ready. We're leaking all the names, right? The names that are coming back. What is your take on the leaked, rumored name of the San Antonio franchise of the XFL being the San Antonio Brahmas after, The Rock, the Brahma Bowl, the San Antonio Brahmas. What do you think of that?
Well, let me think. I hadn't heard that. You know what? I hadn't heard. But I'm a big rock fan. I've got like a bunch Project Rock. I have sweatshirts. So I sort of like it. The Brahmas, I like it. Why are they taking a lot of criticism already?
Yes. yes, a lot of criticism.
What you want them to be? What are they going to call them? The Lions or like any other one of? But some people don't like the name Red Blacks. They're like, what's a Red Black? Well, you don't have to be a Red Black. Sometimes it's about branding. Like Red Black, it's a wide open palette. It can be anything. It's the colors. The colors of Ottawa have always been red and black. So people are like, well, that's a stupid name, the Red Blacks. I like the Brahmas. I can picture the bull snorting. And you know what? I'm going to get the sweatshirt. If they're called the Brahmas, I'm getting myself a Brahmas sweatshirt. I'm on board.
All right, Tim, I'll help you. We'll get you a Brahma.
Are you against it?
There's been a couple of changes, right? So this is all. So they leaked everything on the shop like 2 weeks ago, and then we found it, and so the world went down. So it's the Seattle Sea Dragons, not the Dragons. It's Seattle, which I mean the Seahawks, and I'm not losing sleep over that. But they're relocating a couple of teams, and then the only new team they're doing is the Brahmas, which one of our listeners, Max, is called. So it'll be the San Antonio Dwayne Johnsons. That'll be the name of that franchise. It just seems too cute by half. It seems a little too cute by half. Like, hey, we need a trademark. Hey, Rock, you own this. Like, can we use this in one of the teams? Like, it's been getting a not overwhelmingly positive reaction.
Well, there's your negative social media comments. I'm actually on board with it now. The more I think about it, yeah, I'm okay with it.
Well, we'll get you some Brahmas merchandise when it comes out. Tim, any other thoughts? I really appreciate it. We'll be seeing you here in a little over a month's time. We'll get all that figured out. Anything else before we let you go today?
No, I'm just, you talk about Grey Cup, and I think obviously the NFL is a great game. The Super Bowl is a great experience. But I don't think there's any week like Grey Cup week, especially the Thursday, Friday, Saturday leading into it. It is such I think from a fan's perspective, such a fan event where I don't know that the same aura is around the Super Bowl, where fans from different teams are getting together and it's like a big love-in. I think what Super Bowl, like these guys, Raiders fans are getting fired up and ready to fight people. They're not putting their arms around fans from Packers fans and saying, yeah, great, you later, I'll buy you a beer, which is what the Grey Cup is. So maybe we're just more of a love-in country, I guess. We can get along for a few days, and then I'm going to hate you the rest of the year because you're cheering for the Stampeders or you're cheering for the Bombers. I don't know. I look forward to Grey Cup. Always do. Always a great experience. And I think the jockeying to get there, I know you're kind of like, oh, what's going to happen for the rest of the season? It's going to be interesting, I think. And I think it will be, the playoffs will be interesting. And what's going on in the East, as bad as a couple of those teams have been, could start to heat up in the next month as well. It's one of the great things about the CFL, I guess. It's just unpredictable.
I will say, and as someone that, I enjoy the NFL, I do like what the XFL is trying to do in terms of like fan with tickets and the USFL and the CFL. Like, I will never in my lifetime attend a Super Bowl, right? Like, ever. It doesn't matter. Like, as much as I would, I mean, even if the Washington Commanders rally behind Carson Wentz, make it to the like, I'm never going to that. And I think that's where the NFL has lost. And they don't care because they're making $1 billion. I think it's not accessible to like. I think
what the Super Bowl is, it's a bunch of parties going on, but they're all high priced, and it's who you know to get in. It's not. Is it a fan experience? The game itself, great experience, great halftime show, a lot of stuff going on, great day. But the stuff leading in, it's a lot of high price tickets and stuff. And I think you've got to be you got your corporations buying the tickets, or your company's getting the tickets, or it's not for the average Joe. And I think the CFL is the average person out there, the people who are working the 9-to-5 jobs, and it's just average people having a good time in general. So I think, again, probably the 3 days leading into Grey Cup, it's pretty fun, and I managed to kind of juggle my job and go out and still hang out a little bit, enjoy the good time. We're here for a good time, not a long time, right?
I got my hotel room booked today. I think we'll be squared away. I'll be coming off of, I believe, covering the XFL draft in Arlington that Wednesday. So it could be a very eventful week for Reed, and then I will be excited to follow it up and freeze my ass off in Regina for the Grey Cup.
Should I warn the Regina police that you're on the way, or are there any outstanding warrants or anything?
No, I know. Hopefully, I told you we had the land dispute last year when we tried to enter with the border. So I think hopefully this year it'll all be cleared up by the time we get up there.
Well, you look at you. You're a recognizable personality. You'll just sail right through there. They'll probably give you like I don't know. They'll give you a gift coming into Canada this time. They're not going to hold you back.
They'll give me a bottle of maple syrup.
There you go. It's perfect.
Tim Baines, I appreciate your time. We'll see you in person soon.
Thanks so much. Enjoy.
Big time special thanks to all of our guests today. Professor Andrew Murray coming on in the bullpen, as he said. Both the Padres and the Mariners, as of recording, are currently still both in wild card contention, or in the playoff race in the wild card spot. So really appreciate Andrew coming on. I thought that was a great conversation. Like I said, I think Andrew's always good for a long deep dive. What are we thinking here? Where are we at? I think that's the value of long form podcasts and being able to have conversations like that. And I appreciate that. I think that we have a good, that would probably be a conversation Andy and I would have just on the phone or a Zoom call anyway. And I think that has a lot of value. And I appreciate your guys' comments. I respond to all of them on the YouTube and Twitter. How are you feeling? I mean, if I'm way off, if I'm not, I always want to know. But even now, after recording with Andy and kind of doing this stuff, 50% of XFL fans, almost 400 here on my Twitter, which, isn't the largest sample size, but it's certainly a non-zero sample size, expressing concern right now. And that this is your diehard fan base. These are the people that are wearing the Dragons jerseys to the games, are like Van, superfan Van, wearing his Dragons with the barcodes, with the season tickets and all that stuff, trying to generate content. If you have 50% of those people having a little bit of panic right now, I think that's interesting. I really appreciate Jon Cornish, like I said, coming on, namesake of the Cornish Trophy, and then obviously Tim Baines, longtime friend. Hopefully Tim will be up in Regina this year. I don't know what his assignment will be for the Grey Cup, but it would be great to catch up with Tim as well. Thank you guys all so much. Tune in next week. If we get XFL stuff, I think my work schedule is a lot better. It actually really worked out well for Reed personally this week that the XFL team names didn't come out. I was working a lot during the week, so we'll see. It's not all about me, but I would like just once to be able to time this and like XFL team name, like Reed's live, and we'll see. We'll see. I can only dream. Really appreciate it. Thank you guys all so much for your love and support, and take care.